Joe Biden used his speech today to attack President Trump over his answers in last night's town hall. The former vice president zeroed in on the president's claim that a coronavirus vaccine was weeks away and his lack of support for a national mask mandate, urging Americans not to listen to the president for information on the pandemic.
We can't allow politics to interfere with the vaccine in any way. Americans have had to endure President Trump's incompetence and dishonesty when it comes to testing and personal protective equipment. We can't afford to repeat those fiascos when it comes to a vaccine, when it occurs. The stakes are too high. American families have already suffered and sacrificed too much. So let me be clear. I trust vaccines, I trust scientists, but I don't trust Donald Trump. And at this moment, the American people can't either.
Our CBSN political reporter, Caitlin Huey-Burns, was there. Hi there, Caitlin. You asked the former vice president about his comments on vaccines there. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
You say that you don't trust the president. Does that mean you also don't trust the CDC and the FDA currently?
No. I don't trust some of the people, like the fella who just took a leave of absence from the CDC. He didn't run it, but he was a spokesperson for it. If a vaccine is ready to go, it should be totally transparent, the basis upon which that decision was made. What scientists have looked at it within the government and outside the government and said this is a useful, safe vaccine to take.
Caitlin, what is the line that Joe Biden is trying to walk there?
Well, here's kind of the backdrop to those comments. We see in polling, including our own, that a majority of Americans say that they would want to wait and see before taking the vaccine. So we're seeing in polling a real distrust of the president when it comes to whether this vaccine is something that they would want to take. So that's kind of the context for these arguments. Another bit of context is that the Biden and Harris campaign have kind of gotten in some difficult waters here at points while raising some doubts about trusting the president on vaccines. So the former vice president today was trying to make a clear message, which is that he trusts vaccines, but he doesn't trust the president. And so today he outlined what he would want to see, which is an outside board of scientists that can verify this. And that's why I asked, well, does your mistrust for the president convey also to the CDC and the FDA? And you heard what he said there. But this comes as there are a lot of questions that the public has about the vaccine and whether it is in fact rushed. But in politics, you don't want to play politics with this kind of thing. And so that's what the former vice president was trying to do today.
And Caitlin, as our longtime viewers know, going back to the lead up to the 2018 election, you have been reporting on the importance of health care as an issue to voters. How much more important has health care become since the pandemic began?
Well, it's important because it's clearly a global health crisis, but also because of the economic fallout. You have millions and millions of people who have lost their jobs and therefore, in many cases, might have lost their health insurance because health insurance is tied to employment in most cases. So that's what we've seen kind of exposed through this pandemic, making the issue of health care and access to health care coverage all the more important, especially for those Democratic-based voters that we've seen. We've also seen this pandemic have a disproportionate effect on African Americans, on minorities, and on those already struggling to have access to adequate health care. So this, I would say, has not only underscored how important it is from a health perspective, but also from an economic one.
And on that point, you also asked the former vice president about the economy. Let's go ahead and play that clip.
If people have questions about the economic fallout from the pandemic now, you have said that you would have acted earlier. What do you say to people who might question how the economic impact could have been different, even if you acted earlier? The social distancing and the closings would still be in place?
No, not necessarily, because you wouldn't be having the high rates of reinfection that we have now. You wouldn't be having 1,000 people a day die. It's about being honest. You know, he loves to quote Churchill, and he loves to quote Roosevelt. Well, you know, Roosevelt said in a crisis in World War II, he said it's going to get worse and worse and worse till it gets better and better and better. And the one thing you have to tell the American people, they're strong. Give it to them straight from the shoulder. They can handle anything.
So, Caitlin, as you mentioned to Joe Biden, voters who are asked still tend to say that they trust President Trump's handling of the economy more. What does the former vice president attribute that to?
Yeah, the economy has actually been a silver lining for President Trump, even as he receives negative grades over and over again on his handling of coronavirus. He does receive positive grades and edges out Joe Biden in many polls, especially in key battlegrounds. I asked the former vice president why he thinks that's the case. Why does Trump have an edge on the economy, even though unemployment is around over 8%? And he said that he needs to do a better job at making his case to the American people about it. He said that he's been out of office for several years now, and he argues that people might not remember everything that he thinks that he had done during the Obama administration. So he seemed to suggest that he needed to make a clearer case on the economy, and his economic proposal has really focused on the disproportionate effect that this pandemic has had, and pandemics within the pandemic, as many like to say. But also, he was seeming to suggest there that quicker action would have meant that we wouldn't have had several months long of this, and that things would certainly have closed, but may have been able to open back up again with better plans. I think that's what he was seeming to suggest. But again and again, we see the economy, Trump having an edge, and the Biden campaign knows that they have some work to do to make up that gap. And that's why you've seen him give economic speeches, and you've seen him just recently, for example, talk about trade policy.
All right, Caitlin Huey Burns on the campaign trail for us in Delaware. Caitlin, thank you very much.
Thank you.